Hello, welcome to American Contest Live. It's noon on the East Coast, and thank you so much for joining us. We have a lot to get to, obviously, on this Friday in November, right before Thanksgiving. We have a lot to get to, obviously, with coronavirus. Some big news going on there. A lot of news coming from Washington, the White House, and the transition. So we're going to get to all of that. Jason Carter is going to be joining us today on the show. Peter Stern, journalist. He also has a new show right here on Haps coming up. He's going to be joining us to discuss that today. So first, let's jump in, starting with the coronavirus. We're not in a good place with it. Third wave is happening right now. All across the country, cases are surging in just about every state. Midwest seems to be the center of the virus right now. States like North Dakota seeing huge surges across the country. If you come back here to New York City, where I am, just yesterday, the mayor announced that that they are closing schools once again, the first time since the beginning of the pandemic. It's expected that restaurants and gyms are soon going to follow in that trajectory, moving forward a little bit into the future. Other cities also kind of dealing with that same kind of thing. Chicago is a stay-at-home advisory, and so we're really kind of moving into a significant wave here. The president is really not making this his priority. He's talking a lot about his collection of election conspiracy theories, trying to delegitimize the vote. Pretty much, there's no other way to describe this but a coup. We'll get to that a little bit later. As I mentioned, this population of people is getting bigger and bigger. More than 252,000 people have died in the United States. That's the equivalent of the population of Buffalo, New York. So just think about that. That's 252,000 families, more than 252,000 families who are not going to have their loved one at Thanksgiving this year. This is the reality that we're living. These are actual people that these are actual people. You and me, mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, your colleagues, your friends who are not going to be there. And the choices that have been made over the last couple months have put us in this place, have made a bad situation that much worse. And it doesn't have to be this way. It really doesn't have to be this way. Cities like San Francisco, for example, I've seen not a huge amount of case count compared to, states like North Dakota, which have a huge case count. North Dakota, for example, is, very sparsely populated and has per capita the case count of in the top 10 if it was its own country, would be in the top 10 highest countries per capita in cases. Wearing masks is a very simple, easy thing to do. Now, Thanksgiving's coming up. The CDC is saying that people shouldn't travel. It's advising against it. Now, you can't stop everybody from, going and taking part in their Thanksgiving holiday, of course. But you can offer some suggestions of how to mitigate risk, right? Be around people who are in your pod regularly anyways, right? Make sure it's outdoors. If you're going to do something at all in person, it's outdoors, it's socially distant. Try not to share food in a buffet format, maybe plate things separately. It is, there's things you can do. Also, it's a great time to support local restaurants. You can, if you don't like the idea of sitting out in the cold, order from, with your party, order from the same local restaurant. And it's a good way to share a meal in a creative way, while, still social distancing and supporting local businesses that are really struggling through the pandemic, that, by the way, are not getting the relief they need from the federal government. We'll also kind of get to that. There's just so much to get to on today's show. The other thing you can do is, obviously share recipes. Everybody can cook the same recipe at their home and see what comes up, see who did it better. So, on election day here, I had some great voices. Actually, both of them are here on this show today. But first, I want to bring in Jason Carter, who is on the ground floor for us in Florida. He was talking to, voters of color in Miami, and the issues that were important to them in this election. Now, a couple of weeks later, we have seen that the president is kind of trying to delegitimize the vote in a lot of these areas that are, there's a heavy population of people of color, largely Democratic areas. In the very beginning, the president was saying, "Don't vote by mail," and Democrats chose to vote by mail. The count was going to come in after the election, after election day proper. So this is very predicted. This is what we knew was going to happen. The president keeps delegitimizing it. So I want to bring in Jason now. Jason, you're on the screen. Thank you so much. So you've been watching this the last couple of weeks. What have you been seeing?
Well, Andy, good to see you. Good to be here with you. Been seeing what the rest of America has been seeing. As you said, the delegitimization of the vote, which as of today, many outlets are reporting that it's Georgia, for one, a state that has over more than 40% of the population in the urban areas that are Black, mainly Atlanta, a hub of Blackness, a Black Mecca that showed up for Biden this election. We're seeing that. Fine. There was a recount, 5 million votes recounted by hand, which showed unwaveringly that Joe Biden is the president-elect, at least for the state of Georgia, in addition to a lot of other states that were in question. But the conversation that people are having is, why won't President Trump concede? We do know that the GSA is dragging their feet with handing over the reins to President-elect Biden and also Vice President-elect Harris, for whatever reasons that they have, obviously in cahoots with President Trump, obviously still trying to hold on to whatever sense of power they can, because the truth of the matter is Biden has, by all accounts, won this election. In conversation with other people of color in Black communities, especially here in Miami, what they're hoping to see happen now that we have come to the conclusion that Biden did win is him make good on the promises that he talked about during his candidacy, about making sure there are resources funneled back into Black neighborhoods, that they're making sure that Black Lives Matter is still on the forefront when it comes to police brutality. Also, furthermore, social justice reform, right? We know that that was something that was a huge talking point, not only this year, but in the subsequent years, or the previous years prior to 2020, and when the election really got into swing, is how is this new president and this new administration going to address the treatment of people of color in prisons, right? Allowing for a new era to emerge in regards to how we handle people that are thrown in jail for non-violent offenses. So there's a lot of things that are on the table and on the talking points for people of color. But as far as what I'm seeing, it's what everyone else is seeing, right? It's like Donald Trump being a baby and not really coming to the conclusion that he lost and owning that. It's okay, you had 4 years, right? And the rhetoric of the Trump administration is a big reason why Black voters turned out now more than ever, historically, in this election for Biden. His lack of care for the community, and the disdain that the community has for how he addressed things that were at a fever pitch in 2020. Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor. There was a lack of compassion through all of that. And even if they're not political, you should also be very aware of how to connect to the community and what they're going through in their experiences. I'm sorry to say Pence and Trump and the Trump administration did not do that with his presidency, mainly in 2020.
Yeah, for sure. Is there, from your perspective, where do we go from here? Is there something that we can do?
Andy, that's a great question, and that's a question that's on a lot of people's minds right now. Is how do we move forward? Well, I think the best way to move forward is, one, inaugurate both Harris and Biden on January 20th. That's the first thing, right? Secondly, is to more boots on the ground, right? A galvanization and mobilization of this new administration to really have outreach into the communities and actually talk to people, which of course they did during the candidacy, but now it's like actionable items, right? What are the actionable items that we're going to see come to fruition? I think that's how we move forward. A lot of people are going to hold Joe Biden accountable for the promises that he made on his campaign. So, I mean, all will be revealed in the coming months. I do think that the Black vote, what's interesting is how, and for Obama, the Black vote showed up because this is a Black candidate, right? So of course they're going to come out in droves for that. But now, even with voter suppression and everything that was alleged for, that was allegedly engaged to stop people from showing up at the polls, the Black community still showed out in historic numbers. So I think with that said, being aware, being present, having your hands in what's important to the Black community, just for starters, is what's going to help this administration moving forward. So your question is, how do we move forward? Who knows? Who knows? There's a myriad of different ways of how we can move forward. But I think Biden, one of the best ways to do that is just to listen, much like being an ally to people of color, much like being an ally to marginalized groups, listening, and then having people that are of the experience in the room that can enact change, that can make decisions with this new administration. That's a great jumping off point to how we move forward productively and also just authentically with Black voters and the Black community.
Not to amplify a ridiculous message, but the president, he can't be surprised. I mean, I'm sure he's not. He's just putting on this outward face. But he can't be surprised that, he goes to places like Erie, Pennsylvania and says, I shouldn't have to be here. And they're like, okay, we're not going to vote for you. Or,
Right.
You attack people and tear apart the industry of people who live in Detroit. And then those people in Detroit are not going to want to vote for you. Like, you can't be surprised by that. It's just, it's frankly, it's remarkable. He's not surprised. It's a show. It's a show. I can report that I've spoken to several Trump administration officials who are, continually pressing the president to just kind of stop this message. It didn't work, and that he's kind of hurting his own, for whatever it's worth. He's hurting his own legacy for this.
You hit the nail on the head. I want to shout out Sandra Colton Medici right in the comments. She says women turned out in selection, and that has a lot to do with being turned off by Trump's treatment of women as well. Absolutely. Again, marginalized groups of people saw an opportunity now more than ever to let their vote be heard, because we cannot have another 4 years of what has been the last 4 years. And to your point, absolutely. When you have people in your own camp that are smart, Ivy League educated, that you hired to make sure that who you are and what you do and how you show up to the public is on point, when they're telling you, hey bro, it's time to wrap it up. It's time to it's time to call the U-Haul and let's get this going. That says something about everything. When normally people who would have stood by you religiously, without the shadow of a doubt, we're in your corner saying, man, this is not a good look. And you mentioned legacy. It's funny you bring that up, because the other day I was having a conversation about Trump's legacy. Normally, someone like Trump could leave office, possibly go back into reality TV, have his own network, do whatever he wants to do after this, because he does have a base of people who are going to follow him wherever. They will be able to have those opportunities. But Trump is for sure making sure that won't happen, because now he just looks immature and looks daft. It's one thing to, for a week, say, you know what, I don't know the votes. Let's wait it out and see about this recount. Let's make sure we have accurate information instead of allegations of fraud. Let's make sure we have actual examples and stone hard, concrete evidence of fraud. But we don't have that. But yet, so now becomes this pathetic and very embarrassing, I would say, rhetoric and narrative of, well, I'm just going to sit here and sulk with my thumb on my mouth because I just don't want to give up power, right? It's a very disgusting display of white privilege to me, honestly, as a Black man, and for a lot of people of color and a lot of marginalized groups. So I can't wait for this concession speech and to see what he has to say, because it's going to come eventually.
I think another thing that's particularly interesting in terms of legacy is Rudy Giuliani, because you know if he didn't get involved with this, he would have gone down in history and as as America's mayor. He was the mayor
Right.
during of New York during 9/11, and for
Yes.
whatever it's worth, he led the city through a very tragic period. He's sitting there right now as the chauffeur of this clown car. He
Hmm.
is uh he is sitting he is standing at the podium talking about that the Dominion election systems is part of has all this stuff to do with the Venezuelan government. They're based in Denver. It's it's insane. And he's continually spouting these things, and it's every single thing. Is this thing in it was this thing in Borat. It's calling butt dialing reporters.
Hmm.
It's just he's
Well,
I really fundamentally don't understand
Andy,
his.
no one does. It's like Lindsey Graham allegedly asking Georgia officials to throw out all errored ballots, but saying he didn't. But we know we read between the lines. The thing is, the press and the media has moved beyond this now. Now, more and more people are starting to ignore Giuliani. They're starting to ignore President Trump, and they're pivoting. They're focusing on what needs to happen. They're focusing on moving forward. Joe Biden himself says, I don't want my presidency to be marred by continuously talking about effing Trump. That's not what we're here to do. I could absolutely go down that road and be a part of that soap opera. But what's more important is the future of this country. Joe Biden cannot rebuild this country in 4 years. Obama cannot rebuild this country in 8 years. But you know what? They're all going to die trying, and Joe Biden wants to die trying. And there's something to be said for that. So sure, Giuliani, as to your point, he 100% unequivocally could have been the country's mayor, because what he did and how he handled 9/11 that defines a career. That defines a man. But to now, for whatever reason, because of money, because of affiliation, because of whatever contract or agreement or relationship that he and Trump has jumped in bed with, it's not a good look for him as well. But as I said, the media has moved on. We're now pivoting. And I think before the holidays, after the holidays, and mainly moving into January, Trump is going to become this blip in the fabric of American history. And I know that's crazy to say, because he has, for me in my lifetime, has been the most polarizing, been the most dramatic, been the most damaging president we've ever had. But as we move on as a society, as humans, things become further in the rear, become further in the periphery. And I think Joe Biden also realizes that too. So who knows, Andy, what's going to come to fruition in the next couple of weeks. What I do know is that transfer of power needs to happen fast, very fast, exponentially faster than it's ever happened before in the past. And what I would say, what Trump will do once that happens. I stand by. I want to hear this concession speech, if there will ever be a concession speech. Will he go willingly, or will we have to drag him into the night with it?
Well, not to editorialize here, but fortunately, the new administration, the people who are coming in, Joe Biden was the vice president for 8 years. So there's some learning curve stuff that would be there for other people that isn't there. And Kamala Harris was in the Senate. She was on a lot of very pertinent committees that are very pertinent to this moment. So she's going. It's not like with the Trump administration where they were coming in, where they were coming in and they had a huge learning curve, which they ultimately never learned. So I mean, there is that, but like the more they do this, the more they delegitimize the process. And some people, the more and more they push this, the more difficult it is for us to get back. And the other thing that's worth pointing out, though, is that Trump did surprisingly well in this election, and it says that there is a huge division in this country that's still there and really needs to be addressed.
Absolutely.
And it is, it frankly, it is a little remarkable how well he did under literally anybody else. If 230,000 people died under a president's watch, most people would be like, no way you're getting a second term. I'm not
Right.
even going to consider that.
I don't
And
think it's remarkable at all that he did surprising well, Andy. Not at all. And I say that. And again, I'm gonna throw race into it. I know viewers that are watching are not going to agree with me, but that's okay. That's why we can have dialogue. Being black in America and seeing how much red was on the map for Trump was not surprising. I'm sorry, it's not surprising. With everything that's happened this year, just what we've seen, my experience is vastly different than yours, Andy. So my engagement with people in regards to race and politics is also vastly different. And the conversations I have with people who don't share the same ideologies that I have been very intense and very eye-opening and very truthful. So for your statement that it was surprisingly or remarkably surprising, sorry, that Trump won. I'm like, no, I expected the turnout to Trump to have the turnout that he did. I expected that. All people,
well,
that is why you saw a bigger turnout from the black vote. You saw a bigger turnout from minority women's, because we knew from following the news, from seeing the Black Lives Matter uprising of this year, from everything that's happened, we knew that evil, and I'm going to call it evil, white supremacists, the Proud Boys, people of that nature, we knew they were going to come out even harder than ever. They were going to mobilize and galvanize even harder than ever for this campaign, because they finally had their day in the sun. They were co-signed, approved, and supported, not directly, but they felt they were, by 45. So we knew we had to suit up and have boots on the ground to make sure that it's like, I always use this analogy: the Avengers fighting Thanos. Every part of the MCU had to come together to fight Thanos in Endgame, right? That's exactly what had to happen in this election. So I'm not surprised at all. And as far as Biden and Harris, they don't get a pass though, because all eyes are on them now. If one thing this election has taught us is that we have to be the watchdogs of the people we put in office now. If one thing the last 4 years has taught us, Andy, is that we have to be the watchdog of the people we put in office. So Harris and Biden, yes, they are the champions right now, but they don't have room for error either, because we are watching them as well. And they also have extreme pressure on them to show and prove, because of the privilege that we have given them of being president-elect and vice president-elect. So they don't get a pass either. But as you said, and it's a great point, I'm glad you brought that up. They're not new to this. They're not new to this. This is not, the learning curve isn't going to be a learning curve. It's going to be, how can we do what we've done in the past and do it better? How can we bring our powers as the Avengers and use them for good for the American people? I'm going to use the Avengers, but hey, that's the best analogy I have if you want a Friday morning.
Well, there are some concerns actually, I've seen some of the reporting of who may be in the Biden cabinet, and some of them do raise some questions for me about, about kind of some judgment calls here. Like they're considering the CEO of Quibi for, I believe it's commerce, which seems like a very bizarre move. Having somebody who was the CEO of a company that failed in 6 months seems like a, kind of a bizarre choice. So, there's a lot of you have here, but it's important to note that we're getting back to a place in the discussion where this is about, nuanced policy conversations. This is not about just like basic, you can't do that. Like, this is not something that you can legally do. It's
Right.
These are nuanced conversations about what this appointment is going to mean for X, Y, and Z. And I think that's important. Anyways, Jason,
Andy, real quick to that point, though, I also feel like you yourself included, we have all been made aware of how hard life has been for the globe with this pandemic, right? We've all been made, like, 2020 has been this dumpster fire of a year where so many things that normally would happen in years apart have come to fruition in a matter of days. Pandemic, civil unrest, um, murder. You know, like all these things that were people to where people. You mentioned nuance. Yeah, this administration has a unique, I would say, task at hand on how to repair a country beyond policy, because it's beyond policy now. It's about emotional healing, really. Sure, yeah, there's policies that affect us all, but also people want to be seen and heard on such a deeper, more intrinsic, visceral level beyond just the normal talk track of, you know what, I'm going to put this bill into effect. We're all going to get healthcare for all. It's beyond that now. Administration. There's so much more, as you said, nuanced conversation that needs to happen on different levels besides policy and just day-to-day political dealings that normally happen when you come into office, like foreign policy and world leaders and things of that nature. It's beyond that too.
Huh. Okay. Go. Looks like I'm having some connection issues here really quick.
All good. It's live TV. It happens.
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can hear you clearly and I can still see you.
Ah, okay. Interesting. Oh, there we go. Okay. Looks good better on my end. Yep, live television. That is what we got for you. And on that note, thank you so much, Jason, for joining me on this Friday afternoon. And next, I'm going to bring in a wonderful other voice who can talk a lot about some of the stuff going on in the media and how to cover this moment. His name is Peter Stern, and he actually has a news show that's going to be launching right here on HAPS, the live news network that is, we kind of push to all of these different platforms, including Reddit, where I can see a lot of commenters asking some good questions. So Peter, are you with us?
I am.
Hello, Peter. Thank you so much for coming on this morning.
Thanks for having me, Andy.
So, first things first, Jason mentioned, there's been this reporting about Trump potentially starting his own media company. That's, really, it's a huge question with a potentially very obvious answer that he's going to create essentially an InfoWars with a better budget. What's your take here?
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, we have to see if he actually leaves office. As Jason was saying, I'm not sure he's going to concede. But if he does, if he accepts that he's lost the election and, he's no longer the president, I think he will immediately start campaigning for 2024. And I think he will also try to maintain his following. And one way he could do that is with a media company. There were a lot of reports back in 2016 when everyone assumed that he would lose the election, including him, that he had planned after the election to start an online media company. And I think that was plausible. Obviously, he didn't because he won the election, so why bother? But now that he's lost, once he accepts that, if he accepts that, I think it's definitely possible that he will decide the best way to continue to be part of the conversation. He loves calling into news shows like Fox and Friends. He loves sitting down and doing interviews with reporters like Maggie Haberman from The Times. He clearly wants to continue opining on current events. And one way he could do that would be with a media company. I think it's definitely possible that, as you said, InfoWars with a better budget. I don't know if it would have a better budget. This would likely be a relatively bare bones online media subscription-based type thing. I don't think we'll see him buying a cable network. It's possible he'll have a contributor slot or a show on something like OANN or Newsmax, but I think it's also likely you'll see some kind of Trump Nation online streaming video service similar to what Fox News has with Fox Nation. A lot of President Trump supporters believe that Fox is now too liberal because they have reported that, factually Trump has lost the election. So I think there's definitely the possibility, there's an opportunity for Trump to get to Fox News and maybe even OANN's right and launch a streaming network that would be specifically for his followers, that would not be a news network, but would be an opinion network that would tell them what they want to hear, which is that President Trump is continuing to fight for patriots and for the country, even though he's temporarily out of power.
Well, I have a question for you kind of about that a little bit. I was really thinking about what does it mean for, like, if he starts his own network, he's really kind of poaching the audience of these Trump loyalists who tune into people like Sean Hannity and Laura Ingraham every night, right? Why would viewers still watch? Why would viewers still watch these Fox opinion programs if they can just go, rather than hearing these Trump loyalists on Fox, go straight to Trump himself?
Yeah, I think that if Trump were to launch a subscription streaming service, something like a Trump Nation to compete with Fox Nation, that is very bad news for Fox. It's not necessarily bad news for people like Hannity and Ingraham, who I think Fox supporters may feel they're the only, real journalists or honest ones at Fox, whereas the rest of the network, has been infested by liberals who hate the president. So I think that, Trump supporters may continue to watch those people like Hannity or like Tucker Carlson, who they believe are on the president's side, but they would be more likely to subscribe directly to the president in addition than, say, to subscribe to Fox News's add-on service, Fox Nation.
So let's talk about, obviously there's the president is peddling a whole collection of different conspiracy theories about the election. This is a news event. Taking some of this stuff live is amplifying misinformation. How, in your view, as a media reporter, how in your view should networks really be covering this?
It's difficult because on the one hand, you don't want to, as you said, amplify misinformation or misleading information or give people the impression that the election is actually in dispute. To the results and these attempts to get ballots thrown out, you are in a sense legitimizing it. On the other hand, I don't think that the media should just not talk about it at all, because this is someone who has a great deal of power. He is still the president for at least another month or two, and he is someone who is trying to consolidate his hold on power. He is purging top Pentagon officials. He is getting rid of anyone he sees as disloyal. People have described this as a potential coup or a coup in progress. And I think it's important for the media to cover that. So it's a difficult line that they have to walk, because on the one hand, you need to broadcast to the American people what is happening. You need to say, the president is doing this and it's unprecedented. But at the same time, you have to make sure to always provide the context that the president is saying this, but there is no evidence to support this. So I think it's very difficult, and it's something that the American media hasn't really had to deal with before Trump came on the scene 4 years ago. This idea of reporting on the president in a way that both informs people what he's saying and also does not amplify the misleading and often outright false statements that he's making.
Well, I mean, I have a background, before I have a background as a network producer, worked for CBS, CNN, all these places, and something that especially the networks, not the cable networks, the big three, ABC, NBC, CBS, is, you watch the evening news, they have these packages that are, they're clips, they're sound bites of various, press conferences and things like that put into a package. And then the reporter gives them, gives context to what's being said. There is an existing strategy that has been used through broadcast journalism through its inception, to take raw information, dissect the necessary information, and put it in a format of the information that people need to know. The problem with cable in a lot of ways is, and that there's a lot of room to fix this, and it is a very easy fix, is to just take this information, vet it, and put together the information there that needs to be told to the that is the relevant information that helps kind of build that conversation around actual factual information. And there's an existing strategy, and I don't personally understand why that's such a complicated conversation. It's a very simple solution with strategies that already exist. I don't know if I'm missing something here, but like, what's your take?
Well, I mean, the difference between a traditional broadcast newscast and 24-hour cable news networks is that the 24-hour cable news networks have a lot more time to fill. Like, the idea of a 24-hour cable news network is that you don't only get sort of the highlight reel of what's happened during the day. You don't only get these clips from press conferences and then some context. You get the actual show itself, right? You have people at all of these press conferences, and when they're important, as when the president speaks, you can take them live. So I think that asking cable news to not cover events as they happen, but instead to take that more traditional broadcast route is going to be a tough sell, because the whole point of cable news and the advantage that it offers, the reason that people would watch cable news instead of just watching, the nightly news broadcasts on CBS or NBC or ABC, is that you can see the entire press conference as it's happening. Like, people watch Fox News so that they can see what the president is saying as he says it in full. I'd say a lot of people watched MSNBC during the Obama years so that they could see Obama's speeches in full. They don't just want the highlights. So while it may be more responsible from kind of a journalistic ethics standpoint to not take these press conferences live, I think that goes against a lot of the DNA of cable news and, the reason to deter, right? Like, this is why cable news exists. This is why they are telling their viewers to watch cable news.
Well, I mean, there's a few things there. I mean, there's a strategy there, obviously, but what this administration has proved is that, there are people out there that know how to, work that system. And there are obviously ways that can be, there's got to be a fail-safe here for this kind of scenario. I mean, yeah, we are the fourth estate where we are, holding leaders, to account for the often crazy things that come out of their mouths. But, we also live in a time of social media amplification where, you hear one thing you don't like, and no matter what proof that you're given to, throw that.
Andy, I
Is
think we
gone,
lost you for a
right?
bit there. Sorry, I missed that. You froze for a bit.
Um, I was saying. Back, we good?
Again, you're going in and out, unfortunately.
Let's see. Okay, here we go. Am I back?
You seem to be back now, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's live television for you. Anyways, what I was saying is like, there's got to be there are fail safes. There are strategies to make sure we can do that. And there's obviously the strategy has worked for a while and it makes sense. But that has changed over time. It has changed over time in social, especially in the age of this unfettered social media landscape where, as soon as people hear one sentence that they agree with, any other kind of facts to otherwise challenge or debunk those claims is dismissed.
So it seems like you're arguing for a kind of a gatekeeping strategy. You're saying that because people, once they hear something that they, agree with or identify with, they are less willing to consider any criticism or any evidence that contradicts that. So the best thing to do is to not expose them to the misinformation in the first place. But I don't know if you can really gatekeep. I mean, if the president is tweeting things, like you can't, people are going to be exposed to that.
Well, is it gate? What I mean by this is rather than putting out all of the information as you get it, taking in all the information, dissecting it, and putting out, using your editorial judgment, what is important for the viewers to take away, right? What is the issue with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that can definitely work on the level of, one network. Like if CNN wanted to do that, but you'd still have people going to Fox. You'd have people on Twitter, on Facebook, getting information from sources that are not verified. So I guess if someone was only watching CNN, then, they would only be exposed to that sort of contextualized news. But what about all the other people? Like, I don't know if you can kind of solve the issue with the media ecosystem by just focusing on kind of individual journalists or individual channels, which doesn't mean that, those individual journalists and individual channels shouldn't try to do the best they can anyway. But I don't know if it would really solve the problem.
Well, two points that I kind of want to challenge there. One, yeah, obviously that it isn't that the people may just go somewhere else for something. Sure, but at the same time, like there's a difference between feeding into it and continuing to amplify it with your platform versus not. And second, and I've said this time and time again, if you're getting all your news from one outlet and one institution, you're really, you need to change that. You need to, you need to get your information from a diverse set of sources. And whether, it's CNN and Fox and a bunch of the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and your local paper. And, I personally, I get my news from probably 100 different sources. Some places cover different things, and it's important to really have those discussions. So That's kind of where things are.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obviously, from a media literacy standpoint, you want people to be getting information from different credible sources. I don't think it's necessarily, we shouldn't just recommend everyone go out and get information from as many sources as possible, because there are different sources have different quality. You say if you're getting your news from CNN and Fox News, but I feel like for a lot of people, it's, are you getting your news from Facebook and from Fox and from, the Washington Free Beacon or the Daily Caller or 8kun? Like,
well, what I mean is if you want better business coverage, maybe you should go over and see what's happening on Bloomberg. If you want better political coverage, maybe go see what's they're saying on Politico. Maybe if you want to get coverage of something that's happening in Texas, you go read the Houston Chronicle. If you're surprised that one outlet is covering one thing and another is covering something else, you really should be getting a diverse set of perspectives on all of these issues. That's just my view.
Yeah, I think that's fair. When you're asked if people want to know, if they're interested in knowing what's going on, if they're not just, if they don't already have a belief about what's happening, and whether the president is, a hero or a villain, if they want to sort of be exposed to a diverse array of viewpoints and perspectives on the news, then I would agree. It's good to try and broaden your horizons and get information from different sources and evaluate each of those sources individually. That is not going to help with sort of the larger misinformation crisis, because there are a lot of people who don't want to get more information, who are not necessarily interested in knowing what's actually happening so much as in reading and listening to things that reinforce their point of view. But in terms of, if you are someone who is interested in learning as much as possible, then I would agree with you. You do want to try and get information from a wide array of sources.
Well, before I let you go, Peter, you have a new show of your own coming up soon. Tell me about it.
Yes. So that'll be premiering hopefully this Tuesday. It'll be streaming on Haps, and it will also be multicast to Facebook and YouTube and Twitter. I think it will also be posted to our friends at Reddit as well. This is called Stern Look, a play on my name, Peter Stern. And it will be a talk show where hopefully I'll be able to speak with professional journalists, live streamers, academics, activists, and organizers to try to understand more about how the media actually works and how it could work better. I'm very interested in the old maxim that journalists should afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted. I certainly have left-leaning politics. I'm interested in the relationship between journalism and social justice. So I'm hoping to both talk to journalists about what it is they actually do, whether that is, being part of the White House press pool, or going out and covering street protests, or going abroad and reporting abroad, working with translators and fixers, working for a wire service, that kind of thing. And I'm also interested in talking to media critics, especially media critics on the left, who have ideas for how journalism can better represent marginalized perspectives and really hold power to account. So that'll be Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern, hopefully starting this Tuesday, possibly next Tuesday, depending on when I can book guests. But I'm very excited for it. Obviously, Haps is a startup. This show is very much a work in progress, but I have a lot of ideas of interesting topics to cover and important people to interview. My background is as a media reporter. I spent 3 years at Politico covering the business and the culture of the media. Then I went to Freedom of the Press Foundation, a nonprofit organization where I wrote extensively about threats to press freedom in the United States. I got to interview a lot of journalists who have been arrested or attacked or had their materials and cameras and photographs seized by authorities in the US. So I have a very good understanding of what journalists go through in the US. And I'm just hoping that I'll be able to get some interesting people who I know personally to come on the show and ask them about their experiences as a journalist and what they've reported, and if they're an organizer or an academic, what they've studied, what they've organized for, and allow the viewer to have a better understanding of both what journalism is now and what it could be in the future, how we can improve it. So I'm hopeful that if you're interested in issues of journalism and politics, especially from a center-left perspective, you will tune in on Tuesdays at 6 and subscribe to the show.
You heard it here. Well, not first, but you heard it here. Peter Stern, he is the host of Stern Look. It's going to be premiering here on HAPS News, the network of Now, on Tuesdays, 6 p.m. Peter, thanks so much for joining the program today.
Thank you, Andy.
And that's all for us today on American Context Live. So we will see you here. Actually, we're not going to be on next Friday. I won't be in on next Friday for the Thanksgiving holiday, but we'll be back the following Friday. You can make sure to watch us with the exception of next week. But we are on at Fridays at 12 p.m. Eastern Time from New York. Until then, I'm Eddie Hirschfeld. We'll see you next time.